Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and in an era where everybody wants to talk about AI, I also know that taking it a step further, you don't just want to talk about it, you want to figure out how to implement AI securely, responsibly, and profitably, and that is exactly why we've gone out and found an incredible guest and expert in this domain and a fellow entrepreneur. His name is Evan Glaser. Evan is the founder and CEO of Alongside AI, where he helps organizations move AI from experimentation into secure, production-ready systems. He brings a background in cybersecurity, AI governance, and enterprise consulting, and works with leadership teams to reduce AI risk while accelerating real adoption. I love the fact that the word real is in there. We're going to push Evan about the real part of that because so many people talk about it without actually understanding the nuances. Evan is known for bridging the gap between security, compliance, and business execution so companies can move faster with confidence, which is what we all want. So I'm excited about this one. Let's dive straight into my interview with Evan Glaser. All right, Evan, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Heck yes, you and I may have geeked out about soccer off screen, but we are definitely going to geek out about all things business and AI on screen. So I'll put you on the spot. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Evan? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here and talk a little bit about my journey. My name's Evan Glaser. As you mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Alongside AI. I started working straight after college in the tech space and had gotten some sage advice that I reflect on now, which was essentially you want to spend your 20s developing expertise in areas that are growing in importance, right? And ideally, if they are interesting to you, that helps a lot too. And I took that to heart and really spent my 20s working in companies that were developing great products and had great people in cybersecurity, data privacy, and AI governance. And I felt that there was this window of opportunity in creating and starting my own firm to help bring some of the lessons learned and expertise I've gained across those different domains to the folks maybe outside of the Fortune 100 that are leading the charge in some of these niche fields. So we'll unpack that, I'm sure, today. But if I were to sum it up, I've got a diverse set of skills across software engineering, sales, and others, and I've utilized them in some really interesting areas that are now growing in importance, like AI. And I'm really excited about what my business is doing to, help bring some of that knowledge and lessons learned to folks curious about how they can use AI successfully and safely.
Yeah, I really appreciate that overview, Evan, especially because not only are all of those ingredients important in today's economy and today's business landscape, but I would actually argue that they're all starting to intersect now at the corner of AI and business and people. And so it's really interesting hearing about all these different things that you bring to the table. You know as well as anybody else how much AI is now part of the very mainstream conversation. From your vantage point, what are some of those narratives that you look at and you go, yeah, no, we're starting to figure this thing out, versus those parts of the narrative, which inevitably they exist, where you're thinking, we're not quite there yet. That's not exactly the reality or the future of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I find that my mentality is one of openness, where I'm willing to be proven wrong because there are folks working in so many different domains within the broad category of AI. I give an example where last year I was carving out a bit of a reputation in my small circles of someone who is very anti-AI agent. And I'm happy to unpack that paradigm, but essentially an agent, as a bullet point here, is an AI system that has a lot more access to tools beyond just a chatbot. Because due to my experience in helping build AI programs and implement AI products at various Fortune 100 companies, I've seen the brittle nature of these AI agents, where they look so sleek and so powerful in demos, but then in production and in real environments, they end up breaking so often and so unpredictably. And then there's a gap of who's supposed to fix and get that agent working properly again. And the reason I bring that up is, in my view, that has changed. And it's not to say all agents work perfectly all the time anymore, but there are a lot of agents out there in the artificial intelligence landscape that are actually incredibly powerful and pretty reliable. And so I use that as an example where you can't, in my experience, ever draw a firm line in the sand and say, this facet of technology will never work. It's all right, here's what it does well today. Here are some known issues or areas where it falls short. And if the landscape or the technology changes, in my experience, it really pays to be willing to revisit your priors. Now, there are folks who are PhDs and way more academically inclined than someone like myself, who may have more technical know-how to say that there are certain gaps or failures within certain technology paradigms, and that might be the case. My mentality, my approach, and my business is very much focused on practical, secure, and productive AI deployments.
Okay, Evan, you went there, so I'm going to follow you while we're on the air together. You called out agentic AI. And last year, 2025, obviously I have conversations with entrepreneurs for a living. And so last year, everyone started saying agentic. And people were just like, okay, what does agentic actually mean? And then OpenAI tried to stake their flag in the ground as they launched, I think they just called it like ChatGPT Agent. Didn't really do much. I think we all got very excited and then we tried it and it didn't do anything at all, in fact. And then obviously Claude Code, and there's so many different coding. We see a lot more coding agents, I would argue. Lovable is a very powerful tool, and there's so many out there. But at the risk of you and I being outdated within the next week, right now, all the rage is Claudebot. And there's so much going on in the world of what agentic AIs can do. People are building them locally. Some people are not very securely putting them onto free AWS servers, and they're getting leaked. So, Evan, there's a lot to unpack there, but introduce listeners who aren't as geeky as you and I are about agentic AI solutions. What does that landscape look like? Because you've clearly had a change in heart in that direction. And I think we're moving in a very positive direction there. So walk listeners through that.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned Claudebot. It has gotten a lot of the attention in the past week or so. I believe they actually just changed their name to Multi or something related to molting in the lobster mold after pressure from Anthropic. Anyway, I look at Claudebot as an example of an amazing breakthrough or advancement in some of the technology that we see in giving these AI systems the ability to reason, figure out how to accomplish more sophisticated tasks by utilizing different tools. And where I see this as an incredible leveling up in some of the skills and tools that are available to folks like you and me, it also poses pretty significant security gaps. I was talking to some folks on LinkedIn today about, there are tools that enable you to see public-facing IP addresses out there, right? And when folks are so excited about building these Claudebot or multi-systems, there are best practices from a security discipline that they may not have the expertise on, which poses an entirely new set of risks and vulnerabilities. When those tools also have the ability to act and access potentially sensitive information like credit card information or banking details or all of the other information that you have on your computer, it really amplifies and magnifies some of the risks posed in today's landscape. All of that is a long way of saying there are amazing tools and technologies, and there are massive risks posed by these changes in the landscape. Now, tools like Claude Code, Codex, some of these other sort of more engineering focused AI agents, I've had so much success with and really feel like a kid in a candy store every time I get to dabble with them. It's not to say that Claudebot or Multi won't get there or is impossible to set up in a safe and a secure way. I guess it's a roundabout way of saying with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that some of us who have spent more time and energy in these security, data privacy, and AI governance domains, maybe some of those risks become more evident.
It's a tough question to ask you as a follow-up to this, because hearing you talk about that, you use the one word that I am totally fueled by, which is excitement. And it's easy. All of us business owners and business leaders in any capacity, I'm sure even people in the 9-to-5 world, we do get excited about all these emerging technologies. And often, I think all of us as entrepreneurs, we're very much united in the fact that we play with them. We just sign up and we start playing with these tools long before we ever put them into our businesses, because for most of us entrepreneurs, business and life, they just kind of go together. We're always kind of working and we're always just kind of playing, and work is play and all of that, Evan. But with these agentic systems, it's the first time that I've hovered over that allow button when it says, hey, do you want to allow me to read and write and delete any file on your computer? And my answer is no, I don't want you to. But in order for you to do the very powerful things that I want this tool to do, I have to click yes. It feels like such a binary decision for me, Evan. You obviously work in the world of protection and governments and cybersecurity and all of that. For those of us who are end consumers and it seems binary, either we give the keys to the kingdom or we don't get to leverage these new tools, how the heck are we supposed to balance that?
It's a great question. And my blanket advice is that given a specific scenario, I'd be happy to give guidance that I see as appropriate. There are techniques, tools, and capabilities that are available that help drastically reduce some of your attack surface or exposure or risk. For example, if you're familiar with the paradigm of containers, there's a way to basically run a lot of these new AI tools and AI agents within containers. And as sort of like a brief analysis, think about utilizing a container as providing a computing environment that's isolated from the rest of your machine, right? So as a way to say, hey, I want to dabble with this new AI technology and I want to give it the access that it needs to do the amazing things it claims to be capable of, but I want to restrict that access to within a container rather than all of the information and tools on my desktop. That's a good way to do it. I know it sounds ridiculous and circuitous, but if you're someone who's like, okay, that kind of makes sense, but what do I actually do? Asking an AI tool to bring you some, a to-do list or a step-by-step guide on instructions can be a really good way to get started. Again, with sensitive information and with powerful tools and technologies, I'm not going out and saying, just ask ChatGPT and do whatever it says. But these AI tools, even in chatbot form, are pretty incredible at making the information available that can allow you to upgrade your skill set in such a wide variety of disciplines. It does require a bit of discernment on the end user to actually determine, like, is this a good idea or is this not? So my blanket response is I'm happy to provide guidance in a case-by-case scenario. There are best practices that are out there and are available, and you're really only one good query or prompt away from leveling up in that regard.
Yeah, and along those lines, obviously, that leads us right towards that term that is becoming ubiquitous in your sort of industry is responsibly. Using AI responsibly, integrating AI responsibly. And Evan, the more that I prepped ahead of today's conversation with you and the more I played with other agentic tools, the more I realized I actually have a responsibility to myself and my own local machine. I want everything on there to be safe, but I also have responsibility to my clients, to my customer base, to my businesses. Responsibly means a lot of things. When you use that term, what does it mean to you, and how can we really hone in on the aspects of using it responsibly that we should be focusing on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I find that the concept of responsible AI is really sort of a culmination and coming together of some of the previous disciplines in which I've worked as it pertains to this pretty powerful technology of artificial intelligence and large language models. Responsible AI, I think of as in different sort of layers or different phases, where we can think about responsible AI from a very practical standpoint. And really what Alongside AI serves to do is act as your fractional AI team to tackle both the engineering and strategy aspects of an AI program, but also the security, risk, and governance components. And that includes things like data access, or are you putting sensitive IP or proprietary information into a, let's say, cloud-hosted model provider like an Anthropic or OpenAI or some others. It also includes things like, are you using AI to affect the rights, safety, and livelihoods of your customers or other folks out there in the world? You can think about in the context of if you reject someone's application for insurance coverage and you don't really have any sort of explainability into why they were approved or not, and an AI system is this black box that says, person A gets coverage, person B doesn't, or the premiums are way out of balance, to give an example. There's an element of responsibility there as the carrier in this case, that you should understand what AI systems you are using. You should have full levels of explainability to be able to interpret and, again, explain how you arrived at these conclusions. And there's much more variety and depth in practical, let's say, responsible AI. But if you go a layer up, we can actually start to think about things like environmental responsibility, right? So I think it's pretty well established that these resources or these tools require tremendous resources and energy. You can also think, even in my mind, one layer above that, which is in terms of the global good, right? So I was just watching some clip about how there was a test that said that today's children are the first generation who are measuring cognitively worse than their parents. And I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but basically, are the tools that we're creating hampering and doing more harm than good on a human scale? And I tend to be someone who likes to think big or thinks deeply about these things. I don't really have an answer necessarily. I think that there's a lot of benefit that we're creating through these technologies, especially as it pertains to things like health or drug discovery or things of that nature. But I also think that there are real risks on a human to human and on a humanity scale that I don't know that we have the clear answer for. So while my business is absolutely focused on some of the practical aspects of how do we ensure that we're deploying and utilizing AI in a way that's actually going to be beneficial for us as a company, but also do it responsibly and do right by our clients, there are many, many more abstract or more sort of existential questions about responsible AI that I think are worthwhile to debate and consider.
Evan, I've got to put you on the spot for this because I want to pick on your cybersecurity background. It's my favorite question to ask cybersecurity experts because I think we all inherently know that this is true, is that most of us want to ignore this stuff until it bites us in the butt, until something actually happens. When do companies usually invest in cybersecurity efforts? Well, of course, after something happens, hopefully something tiny that serves as the wake-up call. But Evan, yesterday, one of my clients gave me a call, and I've been working with him for a long time, and he said, holy cow, Brian, it was Claude Cowork is one of those new things out there that can organize your desktop and do a lot of cool things. He said, I use Claude Cowork, and it recommended that I back a lot of things up to the cloud. I can't find anything now. I feel like it deleted everything. And so for him, that was his wake-up call of, wait, I need to actually think about these things. But I'd say that for most of society, we're still in the part of the conversation where we're excited. Here's all the things that are possible. I don't know what that catalyst is going to be for all of us to start saying, hey, there's a reason why there are a lot of brilliant minds in the AI governance space. I feel like Elon Musk is one of those voices who obviously owns a massive AI company and a car company that is also essentially an AI company. And Elon Musk has said that he wants to see more regulations, more governance in the AI world. And we still, as end consumers, we still haven't listened, Evan. So what's it going to take for us to sit down and say, this is the conversation that all of us need to have, not just business owners, not just ones who have been affected, but I'm super curious to hear your thoughts.
It's a great question. I am someone who I would describe myself as very much open-minded to regulation in AI. I think that you'll find some folks who will just say, oh, it moves too fast. There's no way to regulate it. It should just be a totally open and free market. A lot of the people who are saying that are financially incentivized to push forth that type of mentality. But you also see people like Elon Musk, and I've even heard Sam Altman and others say that they are open-minded and would welcome some sort of regulation, be it at the federal level or otherwise, to help start to get everyone on the same page of what does it mean to responsibly utilize, build, deploy these different AI systems. So what's it going to take? That is something that if I knew the answer to, I might be working on it. I see folks like, I'm probably going to butcher the name, but demystifies, I think is his name. He was part of the AlphaGo project. He's part of DeepMind, someone who I really enjoy watching interviews of. He said, I would be open-minded to doing sort of a pause or a timeout on AI development for a few years, right? Where we could all say basically, hey, we've seen a glimpse of the unbelievable power that this new class of technology can provide, but we're also starting to see some of the risks. And given the example you gave with your client using Claude Cowork, we haven't really had that global incident yet to give everyone the time to catch their breath and say, okay, we've got a real risk here that we really need to act on. But can we use that foresight and that knowledge to say, hey, why don't we all just press the big pause button for a year, 2 years, whatever the time frame is, and work together to create a framework that we can all adopt. Now, that said, there are much bigger and broader macroeconomic and geopolitical implications with saying, oh, we're all going to pause. Obviously, there are different countries that are competing to develop and harness AI capabilities at a that a lot of folks frame as an arms race. So if America, for instance, were to say we're all going to pause and countries like China were not to, there are way bigger implications than something I might be able to comment on. Point being, I think in today's landscape, we see things like the EU AI Act as the leading regulation and legislation, which is essentially a framework that includes fines and penalties for folks who fall outside of that regulation. But again, we haven't quite seen it tested and enforced just yet. Now, a big enforcement date comes up later this year. I believe it's August 1st, where certain high risk classifications become enforceable. And just like GDPR, there will be major penalties and fines for those who fall afoul of it. There's also, of course, the opportunity for this to get pushed back and delayed. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern here. And if I were to harken back to some of my cybersecurity experience, I was working at an AI cybersecurity company in 2017, and this was when WannaCry was really making news. It was there are many other cybersecurity incidents, but WannaCry was a big one. Where once WannaCry happened, which was a ransomware attack, where essentially bad actors were using code to infect different corporate environments and hospital systems and banks to encrypt over their data and then basically hold that data ransom and say, hey, if you want your files back, you have to pay us in Bitcoin at this address. That became a really clear moment to wake everyone else up, to be able to say, oh, wow, I just saw all these companies in the news affected by this major cybersecurity attack. Now I know what to look for. I need to go invest to build up my security program to make sure that doesn't happen to me. And in the security vendor space, it sort of gives you a benchmark to try to clear, where in demos and go-to-market motions, you can basically say, hey, you've heard about WannaCry. Here's what that looks like. Here's how our product helps to stop it. For good or for bad, that's sort of what the paradigm moves into when you have these real examples. And we don't really have that yet in AI. We have tools like the AI incident database that I reference quite often, where you'll see some of the more minor, more localized issues that AI has posed. But I'm hoping we can learn from some of these previous lessons in other disciplines to be able to come together and determine what the right type of regulation would be and how to enforce it. But I'm skeptical that that's going to happen.
Yeah, really well said. I mean, there's so much food for thought. You bring up the arms race, and obviously that's a core part of your skepticism, is that nobody wants to lose that. I think about what that arms race has looked like so far within the context of large language models. I think, and this is just something, obviously it's all speculation from all of us at this point, but I think towards the tail end of this year, we're also going to start to see the hardware part of this AI arms race take off. And as an early adopter for Apple Vision Pro, for example, that's the one area where I think to myself, gosh, hardware is just not there yet. Apple Vision Pro can do so many things, but the hardware lets it down. It's big, it's clunky, it feels bad wearing it for too long. And Evan, we've heard rumors of companies like OpenAI launching things like a pen. I still don't know what that pen's going to do and why a pen is the first form factor that they're going after, allegedly. But what's your take on how much we should be thinking about hardware? Because I think once that hardware starts hitting the market, Evan, now AI is not a conversation when you and I are sitting behind our computers. Now it's part of our everyday life. Where do you think we are in that part of the conversation?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. I have a line I tend to say with a lot of my clients where I'm not in the predictions business, because the nature of AI is that it changes so fast that me trying to project what it's going to look like in 18 months is, I find, not necessarily worthwhile. I borrowed that from Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, who says that he doesn't do yearly planning anymore. In an interview, he basically said they plan like a week in advance because everything changes so rapidly. Now, that said, we did a dinner at my last company with some futurists from some leading artificial intelligence and other technology leaders. And we basically said, hey, 10 years from now, if we all got together for this dinner, what are we going to be talking about? And I found it to be really enlightening, some of the key changes that folks are anticipating, especially in the hardware space. One of the areas that I personally am most invested in monitoring is the sort of integration more deeply of AI into our daily lives, whether that's through hardware like the OpenAI pen that you described, or in sort of the biotechnology space, whether that's contact lenses or chips in people's skin. And, I know it's kind of squeamish to talk about at times. I think in the near term, the OpenAI pen, I think the utility of it is basically that it's supposed to look discreet, right? Like if I have a pen sitting in my chest pocket and you and I are having a conversation, it's probably not going to throw up alarm bells, but it might give me the capability to record and transcribe our conversation and then summarize it with an OpenAI model, and then automatically send it to the Gmail API, so that way I can send a follow up and say, "Oh, Brian, it was great talking to you. I really appreciate your insight on X, Y, and Z." So I think that some of these hardware evolutions are exciting to see, sort of like, what is the interface between myself and these large language models going to look like? And it almost starts to feel archaic that I open up an app on my phone and type with my thumbs to interact with them, right? I start to use voice applications where I can just speak directly to these AI systems, and that's cool. But even still, a year or two from now, I wouldn't bet against the idea that we're going to look back and be like, "Oh, you remember when you had to open an app and type? Like, you couldn't just pick up your phone and just talk to it, and ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tool would use these AI capabilities across all of the different systems you might want to interact with." So, I mean, I know it's a long-winded answer, but for an example, if you get up in the morning and you're like me, you might check the weather, check your calendar, maybe put on a playlist on Spotify, maybe check your emails and respond to one or two. These are all different apps on my iPhone that I'm going to have to interact with. But I don't think it's a big bridge to start to imagine where, if I have an AI system that's integrated into my hardware, which in this case is a phone, why do I need to open all these different apps? Why couldn't I just talk to it? Or it knows when I wake up and say, "Hey, here's the weather, here's your to-do list, here are the meetings that you have today. I just drafted replies to these 3 emails because they seem the most important or time sensitive," and have that all integrated into one system versus all these different systems. So a couple different ideas for you there, but I think that the hardware and interface between humans and this technology is something I'm really closely keeping an eye on.
Yeah, gosh, Evan, so much food for thought just in that one answer. I'm really grateful for you taking us there, because I feel like a lot of our conversation, you and I talked about some of the risks and things we need to think about to be on the more cautious side, but you just painted the picture of a very amazing future that, yeah, you're right, I hadn't even thought of. If there was a pen right there in my pocket while I'm just going about my daily life, when I catch up with a friend over coffee and I talk about how terrible Tottenham's been this season, it's so easy for me to then just say out loud, and the pen can capture it, "Hey, I'd love to text Evan and tell him that Mickey Van de Ven needs to be at a club like Manchester United," and it can just go forth and it can banter for me and it can pull all of those things. It's a really cool vision of the future. And listeners, if you can't tell, Evan is a Tottenham supporter, so I had to put one jab into our episode there, Evan, but along those lines, really, it's very cool thinking about all the things that it can do because of the agentic stuff that you and I talked about early on in this conversation. Is that even Claudebot, which is something that is ever evolving, even between you and I talking about this and the episode actually airing, is not only is it changing names, but it can tap into all of these different things, and it can listen and it can grab those transcripts. So really cool possibilities coming forward. And that's why I'm excited to see however you answer this last question, because it's super broad, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who are at all different stages of their growth journeys and all sorts of thoughts and excitement and concerns about AI. Evan, as a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I have so much to learn and so much to grow that being in a position to give advice doesn't necessarily come easily. But what I will say is, if you're someone who's been, maybe working on a side project or thinking about a vision for themselves where they have the freedom to work for themselves and they feel that AI is maybe the enabler to help them do that, the best way is to learn by doing. Now, there are obvious caveats around things like what data do you use, and a lot of these things, the best practices around how to safely and securely use these AI systems is, it's not just the Wild West. But I think about myself and my experience, I have a software engineering background, but I'm just an okay coder, right? So having the ability to utilize an AI system to drastically up-level my software engineering capabilities is like, it's like I'm living in the future, right? But you see that the different sort of, I guess what I'm saying is the barrier to accomplishing different tasks has never been lower. So if you have a vision for a product or a service or a class or something that you have been limited in doing based on your skill set or your availability to tools and technology, I would really urge you to revisit them, right? If you had this great idea for an application, but you haven't had the time to go learn how to code, the barrier has dropped pretty drastically. So whether AI is an important sort of tool for you in your professional career, I mean, I would say it almost certainly is. But rather than necessarily saying everyone needs to go start an AI company, what I would urge you to do is sort of work backwards from what is it that inspires you and excites you in your personal and professional life. And if there are gaps that have, or chasms, let's say, that have seemed uncrossable, I would be willing to wager that there are AI tools out there that can help you cross them safely today, right? This is not all just future speculation. AI is not coming, it's already here. We can talk about semantics of, what is AGI versus AI? Is it possible? Is it coming? My mentality is these tools have really changed the way I live and changed the way I'm able to conduct business. And I would be willing to bet that for all of you out there listening, they could do the same.
Yeah, so well said. Evan, gosh, I'm so grateful for you sharing all of this with our worldwide audience. And I have to say publicly that you're a very important thinker, a very important voice, and a very important founder in this space. And I'm so grateful that there's entrepreneurs like you. And you've built an incredible company alongside AI. I'm very excited for listeners to check out your work and follow along. I hope that you continue putting your voice into the world in big ways, because this is the conversation that needs to happen. So I'm grateful that it's happened here, but I'm even more excited for listeners to check out your work. So for listeners who do want to follow along, drop some links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find our website at www.alongside-ai.com. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. It's been a sort of learning experience for me. I'm not necessarily a poster by nature. I tend to be more private online, but I find that engaging with the community on LinkedIn and getting people's experience about how AI is affecting them personally and professionally has been really rewarding. So you can follow me on LinkedIn and engage that way. I always welcome spirited discussion, whether you agree or disagree. I can't tell you how often my opinions change based on a comment from someone more knowledgeable than me. So I'm sure many of you folks out there listening fit that category. I'd love to chat with you and learn from your experience. So alongside-ai.com, and then you can follow me, Evan Glaser, on LinkedIn.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Otherwise, Evan, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.